Prescription products require completion of an online medication consultation with an independent healthcare provider through the LifeMD platform and are only available if prescribed. Subscription required. Individual results may vary. Additional restrictions apply. Read all warnings before using GLP-1s. Side effects may include a risk of thyroid C-cell tumors. Do not use GLP-1s if you or your family have a history of thyroid cancer.
If you've struggled for years to lose weight and have given up hope, did you know you can now access GLP-1 prescription medications at trylifemd.com? We're now offering eligible patients online access to GLP-1s, the breakthrough prescription medication that can help you lose body fat and weight. Listen to what people are saying.
It's fun to put on jeans that you couldn't get into 6 months ago.
Every morning, I look forward to getting on the scale. For anybody who's struggling with their weight, it's a godsend.
And here's the best part. Your insurance may cover 100% of the cost of your medication. So go to trylifemd.com to have your eligibility checked right now. Get started today at trylifemd.com. That's trylifemd.com.
Okay, Q&A, my favorite part. Our first one is from Robert and says, not going to watch, not realistic, pioneer women didn't cuss and act like men.
Well, this Robert.
That was very passionate.
Well, Robert's a real blast of sunshine, isn't he? Thanks, Bob. We included this one because it sort of represents a lot of people who have really strong opinions about how pioneer women behaved. And I don't know how these people know how pioneer women behaved. Like, all pioneer women didn't behave the same. There was probably the upper class ladies who behaved more ladylike. But you got like the regular working folk. It was probably a real wide variety of how women... I'm sure women cussed in 19th century Texas. Like, it just had to have happened.
Yeah, I'd agree. Yeah, you can't, what you said, there's probably a sprinkle of everything, not just one generic cut and paste.
People upset too about how the women were riding the horses and talking about side saddle. It's like, okay, sure, but I mean, it's at a certain point you have to kind of eliminate certain things that you're going to represent. I think Faith isn't necessarily Faith Hill. Margaret Dutton isn't supposed to represent all women. She's just her. She's one type.
Right.
So, but thank you very much. That was from YouTube, and we appreciate people watching on YouTube. So thank you, Robert.
The next one that I have is from Rob. I can't stop watching it. I usually watch each episode 2 to 3 times now. Wow, good for you. And I got my wife hooked now. Episode 5 broke her heart. I agree. And on a side note, really like your podcast. Thanks, Rob.
Yeah, that's a different Rob.
Yeah, Robert and now Rob. These are 2 different people.
Yeah.
I called Taylor Sheridan every bad name I could think of for killing off such a likable character. One thing that amazes me is the quality of dentistry back then. Everyone seems to have perfect teeth. I guess the barbers back then sucked at cutting hair, but was great at taking care of your teeth. I obviously, as we talked about earlier, I am a teeth gal. I noticed that as well. But Billy, can you share the story kind of behind a specific teeth scene? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do. Well, we can go back and people can go back to the interview that I did with Eric Nelson. It's in the archives of the Dutton Rules podcast and listen to that. At the very end, he talks about his teeth. And initially, before the very first filming, makeup kind of janked up his teeth a little bit so that they didn't look so good. Because he does have tremendous teeth. They're really, really white. Like, if you're a country music fan, you might know who Dustin Lynch is. He's like another character with like really white, a really good row of chiclets.
Yeah, that's a good comparison.
Eric walked out of makeup and Taylor saw him and said, take that off. And from then on, they just decided that for some strange reason, Ennis would have fabulous teeth. But then he takes a shot at the haircuts and the barbers.
I know.
Seems a little...
I don't know about that one, but I kind of feel like the teeth is a little bit along the line of the pioneer women cussing or acting like men. It's kind of like, maybe some of them had good teeth. At some point we can't nitpick the smallest things. Next we're going to say, their eyes were too beautiful. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of another like physical feature.
I have one more to add to the pile, and this is from Brandon, who actually wrote us a really, really long, really insightful email at staff@tasteofcountry.com where he did some pretty fantastic research. And I'm going to summarize a lot of this and then share an Easter egg that he kind of pointed out. First of all, he corrected us. Last week, we said that the Four Sixes was about 45 minutes away from Fort Worth. As it turns out, it's several hours away. I think we were looking at the town of Weatherford, and Four Sixes is not in Weatherford.
Correct.
So that's where our confusion was there. But thank you, Brandon. He also broke down the route that these pioneers are presumably taking up to Montana, Oregon, and parts unknown. And the way he broke it down is really impressive. This topic of the route that people took is a really popular thread on Reddit. And I'm going to summarize that by saying he believes they took what's called the Great Western Cattle Trail, because another trail that's popular that people that took the Chisholm Trail started to kind of get closed down by 1882. The Great Western Cattle Trail starts a little west of Fort Worth, and that would cross the Brazos. From there, he specifically has them located near Fort Griffin in Texas, and you literally can Google that and see exactly where he thinks the pioneers are right now. And to be honest, based on what he said, I don't think he's wrong. Like, I think he's kind of in that general area in the northern part of Texas, some couple hundred miles away from Fort Worth.
Dang, that's some pretty good research.
He also points out that, you remember in episode 4, before they cross the river, Shea Brennan is talking to Thomas, and Thomas says that they could stop at Burke Bennett's as a potential ranch to get some food.
Yes. And I'm actually really glad that you are hitting on this because I actually did some research on this. So yes, I do remember that.
Burke Bennett, that ranch would later become the Four Sixes Ranch.
Mm-hmm.
That is amazing research.
Well, and he was saying, if you remember, Thomas, he mentions Charles Goodnight.
Yeah.
Do you in that same scene, who is an actual real life cowboy and Texas Ranger. And you might have already known that. I didn't. And so I went down a rabbit hole. And not only was he a well-known Texas Ranger, and he joined the Rangers at the age of 21, is what the research that I found said. But he also became one of the state's most famous ranchers. And by the time he was 90, Goodnight owned the biggest ranch in Texas, well over 1 million acres. So Thomas mentioning, we'll go to Goodnight and all the above. I mean, that is a real, Charles Goodnight is a real person. So I thought that was super interesting. And obviously someone who, as I live in Texas, I equally found it just as fascinating. Just that's where I live. So
staff@tasteofcountry.com is the email address once again. And I'm curious to see now, as we kind of get towards episode 6, we know that Rita Wilson's going to appear. I'm curious to know if her character is based on a real life person, or kind of how she's worked in. I'm wondering if it's a flashback scene or if they're actually going to visit a city.
I hope so, because the Tom Hanks one, he was there for a mere 3 minutes and then he was gone. So I hope we see her a little bit longer than that.
I do too. And Tim McGraw, I don't know if you've heard interviews with Tim McGraw, but he loves that Tom Hanks scene. Like, he loves it. He's just talking about how he just thought it was like the most
so funny,
beautiful scene, and like he cried and all of this. I'm like, all right, bro. I mean, I guess it was pretty good. I mean, I'm not going to take anything away from him, but it wasn't like, I'm not like, oh, I mean, that piano scene was fine. But Tom Hanks, that was it. He puts his hand on his shoulder. It's like, I didn't feel that. I don't think
maybe says one line. No. Yeah. It didn't tug at the heartstrings like the Beethoven ballad. No.
Right. It's like, I guess you had to be there, Hoss. I mean.
Yeah, it's more, had to be there moment.
Any predictions for episode 6 and beyond?
Deep sigh.
Maybe it's going to pick up. It's going to be a little lighter. It's going to be more
Billy, I don't think it's going to pick up.
fanciful.
I hope. Okay, actually, prediction. I think we're going to we might see maybe some love interest with Thomas and the gypsy. I hope so, because I think this next episode, we're also going to see the contrast of that. I think Elsa might go into depression. I mean, truly, I think we're going to see a really, really dark side to Elsa in this next episode, which emotionally I'm prepared for. So
Naomi
We'll
is her
see.
name, by the way. Her name's not the gypsy.
Oh, the gypsy?
Naomi.
Sorry,
Yeah,
Naomi.
I think that's her
Naomi.
That's her name.
Noted.
Respect
What about
the
you,
woman.
Billy? Any predictions? I know. That's so bad. Naomi.
I think there's more rivers to be crossed because in some of the media days, they talk about having to cross multiple rivers. Eventually, I think we're going to get to some encounters with the natives. And I do think we're going to end up in a city somehow because they got to refill that food wagon. And so I think that's maybe where we're going next. And, once they're in a city, really anything could happen. That could be a lot of fun. We could go into a bar and see kind of a good old shootout. I'd look forward to that.
Oh, yep. So you're saying we're headed towards a city in episode 6.
6 or 7.
Okay. I'll give you 7. I don't think we're going to see it in 6, but we shall see.
And Elsa's just going to be miserable. She's just going to be just really
I know.
that downer of a friend that you got to stick with.
The real question is, will we shed tears? Or really, will your wife shed tears and will I shed tears? I don't think you've shed any tears yet, so I won't put you in that bucket, but
I shed
we'll
tears
see.
for that piano scene. I tell you what, Einstein, I didn't. That didn't get me.
That's actually how Billy
That piano scene. I was like,
Billy literally rewatches the piano scene, y'all. He tells me about the piano scene quite often. So yes, you're right. You're right, Billy. Maybe there'll be another scene like that. That's Billy Dukes, who is actually unable to grow any armpit hair. Thanks, Billy. I'm Addison Hager, and this week we covered a lot of ground, but we'd love to know where you agree and disagree. Do you think Spencer is Elsa and Ennis's baby? Are you ready for a Thomas and Naomi relationship? Are you missing Yellowstone already? Staff@tasteofcountry.com is the email address for questions, comments, and theories, and to share the answer to this week's trivia question. We'll be back with Yellowstone in 1883 Roundtable soon. Dutton Rules is written by myself and Billy Dukes, with special assistance from Sterling Whitaker, and produced by Billy Dukes. Before you leave a review and rating, and please tap follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you're listening. As always, Dutton Rules, a Yellowstone 1883 podcast, is part of the Town Square Media Podcast Network.
What's the easiest choice you can make? Window instead of middle seat? Picking a vendor who sends a great gift basket? Outsourcing business tasks you hate? What about selling with Shopify? Whether you're selling a little or a lot, Shopify helps you do your thing, however you cha-ching. Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. From the launch your online shop stage to the first real-life store stage, all the way to the did we just hit 1 million orders stage? Shopify's there to help you grow. Whether you're selling scented soap or offering outdoor outfits, Shopify helps you sell. Wherever and whatever you're selling, Shopify's got you covered. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/try. Go to shopify.com/try now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/try.
Here's what Eric Nelson is saying, because he has been hitting the media trail hard since his character was killed.
I love it.
He is
yes, and I'm
over.
so glad you brought that up.
He says a couple things. Once, he confirms to Entertainment Weekly that Elsa, we're going to see her walk through the rest of this journey with a much heavier foot than she did before. So you're right. Definitely a pivot for her. He also says, Ennis is not forgotten, but again, I can't explain what's going to happen for Ennis, but Elsa definitely carries his memory on, and we see that throughout. Carries could have been an intentional word choice there. Entertainment Weekly specifically asked him about a pregnancy, and his response was like, I can't say nothing about that. So
I think that a little wink wink.
a little bit.
I think she's pregnant. I feel great about that.
I think so as well. Now, we've made some bold proclamations on this. I've made some bold proclamations on this podcast.
Yeah, I was like, I think specifically Billy, but I wasn't going to point fingers over here. But I'm really glad that you just brought that up because I will get on that statement.
We're not afraid to be wrong. You got to give us credit for that.
True.
Usually we are.
True. Well, what I love, well, yes. I was going to give you a little bit more benefit of the doubt, specifically with the Garrett situation, but yeah.
I remember.
No. But speaking of Ennis, I have loved following him on Eric Nelson, following him on social media, because I really feel like him and Tim McGraw does a really good job too, as, showing behind the scene footage and stuff. But man, I feel like Eric really does a good job of engaging with fans and really pumping up 1883 and his character, and it's honestly been enjoyable following him on social media, as he's just really, really, I think, truly the most, even out of, I'd even say out of the Yellowstone cast, to just really just full on invest in it.
I have a little bit more of a cynical take on it.
Oh no.
I agree.
What is it, Billy?
It has been nice, but this to me is a man looking for a job. Like, have you ever had someone in this industry, you know them well, and then you kind of lose touch, and they get fired, or they lose their job, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, hey, Addison, want to do lunch? Or something like that. Like, he's just like Mr. Sociable, trying to get his name out there everywhere they can. And honestly, I got to give him a ton of credit for it. His publicist is doing a really great job. She's the one that hooked us up with Eric several weeks ago. And that kind of started this. And now he's doing all of the media. He's on Facebook. He's digging into the Instagram lives to sort of get his name out there. This is a man who wants as much of attention right now because the iron is hot and he needs to strike.
It's a smart business move.
Take notes, kids. This is good. Yeah. He is out there. He is looking for a job. Dude's got to get to work. He's got kids. They're not going to pay for their own college.
Okay, Billy, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, let's stay on this because this will segue us into Yellowstone a little bit. Well, first of all, I have a theory that season 1 isn't going to get out of Texas.
Oh, I totally agree. This is taking way too dang long.
Yeah, there's just not enough time left to get through all these states to get to Montana and then Oregon.
Correct.
But Tim McGraw did an interview with Jefferson White's official Yellowstone podcast. That was pretty insightful. He shared something, though, about how he kind of came to the show that I think I don't know if it's important, but it's certainly interesting. The very first scene he filmed as James Dutton was the second flashback scene that appeared on Yellowstone, where he's riding the horse through the woods, chasing those guys who have stolen his horse. There's that big shootout. After that, they shot the very first scene we saw of him as James Dutton, where he's wearing that awesome jacket.
You love that jacket.
And he's talking to the natives about they want to bury one of their elders. He films that next. Mm-hmm. Then Faith Hill is brought on, and they film the scene with Faith in the cabin where she has Spencer and John Sr. and James Dutton gets shot.
It's John Sr. John Sr., you're right. Sorry.
Yeah, James gets shot, possibly even killed during that sequence. I thought that was kind of interesting because we had it that maybe they filmed that second flashback once they kind of realized that 1883 was going to get cooking and they needed some additional promo. Right. But that wasn't the case at all. This was always written into season 4 of Yellowstone that Tim McGraw was going to appear as James Dutton a couple of times, even if 1883, the show, never happened. I don't know. I mean, people are giving this show a lot of crap because, are giving Yellowstone a lot of crap because they're a little bit of a commercial for the 1883 and for the 4/6 shows. And as it turns out, that was just sort of a side effect, not necessarily what they were trying to do.
I personally liked the interweaving of everything just because I felt like it really set me up well to understand as we headed into 1883. I didn't have to start it kind of trying to understand. I kind of had a little bit of a taste going in, knowing, okay, this is kind of what it's going to be about, even 4/6, if that ends up actually airing. Mm-hmm. So I didn't have an issue with it, but I know a lot of my friends who watch it, that is probably one of their biggest things that they say. They're like, too many ads for the other shows, less Yellowstone content itself. So I guess it just depends on maybe if you were a loyal viewer from season 1.
You want to hear something kind of a little bit...
I don't know.
It's a detail
Your pause, Billy, scares me.
It's a detail that Isabel May shares during her interview with Jefferson White that I thought was maybe a bit of an overshare, but she owns it, so I'm going to share here.
Oh, I'm here. Okay. I love oversharing.
It took her so long to grow the underarm hair that we see her with during 1883 that she says she's going to keep it. She's owning it, and she is proud of it. Yeah, you threw up your hands.
I didn't.
You were excited about something.
I literally threw up my hands. Well, because I'm so glad you brought that up, because when I saw that scene, I was honestly impressed. I was like, good for the show for being very accurate, because obviously they don't have razors. They're not out there shaving their legs or underarms. And so I love that they kept to that. But then, guys, my arms started slowly dropping when Billy said, and she's keeping it.
Yep.
So I don't know how I feel about that part, but.
A lot of questions and comments about sort of the women of the late 19th century as we get to the Q&A that I'm excited to dig into. But we learned a little bit about Yellowstone Season 5 this week. You want to move on to that?
Yes, I'm ready to move on.
Okay, so we knew there was a Season 5. Season 4 obviously left off with Jamie killing his dad, his real dad, Garrett Randall.
Correct.
He is now kind of under the Dutton thumb, and I don't know. I think weeks later we have some questions about those scenes as well.
I'm so glad you teed that up, because I have a question about specifically the Garrett and Jamie scene where Jamie kills his dad. I'm curious if, and I'd love to hear your opinion, Billy, if Garrett knew that Jamie was going to come and kill him. I mean, as Jamie walks up and Garrett he looks like he's resigned to the fact, okay, here it comes. And I now see it almost as there was this moment where, Garrett's really buttering him up, telling him how much he loves him, how proud of him he is, almost kind of in a way manipulating, seeing, man, can I potentially, use Jamie's weakness to turn his, potential plot to kill me. Yeah. And he's not going to kill me. Last minute, see if he can change his mind but very subtly, not just saying, don't kill me. And obviously couldn't ultimately talk his way out of it. And then we see that Jamie is more terrified of Rip Wheeler than of keeping his own father alive. So do you think Garrett knew he was going to be killed? Because this is one of those that, like I said, you're walking, I'm doing daily things, and this is in my head going, wait a minute.
This is like one of those personality test questions. Like, are you dogs or cats?
Oh my gosh.
Because I think how you believe this scene went down, and if Garrett knew, kind of states if you're an optimist or a pessimist. Like, are you skeptical of Garrett to no end, or did you believe him when he said, I love you, son, and I'm proud of you? He looked his son in the eye and said he just hopes and prays that he can get over his fear because he can conquer anything. And then he ends with, I love you, son. That, to me, was believable. I have no reason not to believe that man. Everything he did, he says he did for the betterment of his son, but I saw nothing. We are never given any evidence to indicate that he was behaving for selfish reasons. Like, we never saw that. But I do see why one would think that, because he says all that. He has that soliloquy, and then he kind of just turns back towards the river and waits. And it's like, okay, is it coming or isn't it coming?
Right.
I think no.
Well,
I think no. I think Garrett didn't know, and Jamie just did it out of cold blood. And Garrett, like, in that split second between, like, the bullet hitting his head and, like, the end of his life, he was extremely disappointed and heartbroken for his son. And I think anybody who thinks he did know and was trying to manipulate him, those are cat people.
Sorry to all the cat people out there.
So to speak.
I want to hear everyone. Yeah, cheers. I would like to know other people's thoughts on this. So remember, staff at tasteofcountry.com for your opinions. Yep. Are you with Billy? Are you with me?
Are you a dog person?
Which I have one more.
Or are you a cat person?
Are you a dog person? Or are you a cat person?
What else you got?
Okay, I have one more about Jamie and Garrett. Well, Garrett is part of this moment. He's not really alive for this moment. But I would just like to say, how on earth did Jamie, on his way to the train station, not see Beth's car She drives a Mercedes. It's not like,
Yeah.
the average Joe's car. She drives a luxury car. Also, this is a 2-lane road on the way to the train station. Kind of looks like a little, U cut off that you can just kind of pull over. And there's no way that Beth walked to the train station. So that to me, I'm like, okay, wait a minute. There's a little bit of a plot hole here. How did this happen? You're not that oblivious.
The only explanation maybe is that she drove another 100 yards up the road and pulled off and then walked back and was just there hiding. But I agree, that is a little bit of a plot hole. He would have somehow figured that out. Maybe even as he pulled in and his lights would have shined on her somehow. Mm-hmm. It's not like she was in camouflage.
Exactly.
I think was she still wearing her wedding dress during that scene?
She was not in camouflage, Billy.
That dress had a... Yeah, I mean, so that was just something that, we're going to have to live with, one of those. The plot holes video we did, the loose ends video we did in that conversation, yes. It continues to provide a ton of enjoyment because people pointing out little things, the little picadillos about Yellowstone that kind of bother them. And, they're there.
I love reading them personally. I'm here for the holes. Okay. What about you, Billy? Do you have any?
Season 5 of Yellowstone. We know it's coming, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the executive producer, David Glasser, was in Variety, and he said that it was going to begin filming in May, and he was aiming for fall for the premiere of Season 5, which is good information. The fall, hopefully before November, because it started in November in Season 4, and then we had those awkward day after Christmas, day after New Year's Day episodes, which were kind of a pain in the butt to get to. Right. Like, I did it, but I didn't want to do it. Like, I wouldn't mind that wrapping up before the holidays. If you could just work that in for me, thanks, Dave. But we got some further information that I think is not only informative in terms of the production, but informative in terms of what we might see in Season 5. So I'm gonna drill this down for you in the quickest way possible. Dutton Rules, part of the Taste of Country Town Square Media Network. Town Square Media owns a bunch of radio stations. Some of those radio stations are located in Missoula, Montana. These are people that work there are essentially men and women on the ground that have a lot of insight into the filming process. One of them passed forward a press release issued that was a search for housing. Essentially, they got to find places for all these cast and crew to sleep. Specifically, production's going to begin on May 15th and end on August 18th. And it's going to film almost entirely in that Missoula area. So no more Utah. We're not going to have any sort of satellite. I don't know that we'll have any 4/6 scenes, although I suppose it's possible if they want to include Jimmy once again. But here's why I think it's important as it pertains to Season 5. May to August in Montana, green on trees, like green grass, like this isn't the snowy season. I think we wrapped up Season 4 with like kind of late fallish because we saw some snowy days. It was definitely chilly. Sometimes Yellowstone plays around with time a little bit, so you can't exactly tell when. But according to the calendar I have worked out in my head, it was late fall. So now we're fast forwarding to at least spring or summer the following year. The whole governor's race issue could be sort of decided and sort of a moot point and sort of wrapped up in like a sentence or two in Season 5. Jamie will have some sort of, I don't want to say resolution to where he's at, but he'll have many months to sort of get to where he's headed. Beth and Rip are not going to be honeymooning. They're going to be kind of living in the marriage. Like everybody's going to kind of have moved forward a little bit, which I think is also important because of characters like Carter and Rip, the kids. They filmed Season 4 like dang near 2 years ago. They're going to be a lot bigger and look a lot different. If it just picked up the next day. That'd be super, super awkward. Yeah,
well, like you said, kiddos grow fast, and I think that's really where you start seeing the difference of just time. But I do think Season 5 is going to be really, really big. I think it's going to be leading with Casey.
I think so too. But I also think that whatever Casey saw will have started to play itself out. So we might go right into a scene where Casey and Monica are somehow split up. Or on whatever path he chose that leads to the end of us. Like we could kind of be in the middle of that. Like the airport's either going to have advanced significantly. Summer Higgins could be close to getting out of jail when we kind of thought maybe we'd never see her again. I still think we'll never see her again. But it's possible she's going to get out of jail at some point during this season and play a role in Season 5. as well.
Yeah. Well, I actually really, if that ends up happening, I would personally like that, because you kind of, it doesn't drag it out so much of trying to get to where we left off in season 4 to get to just the meat and potatoes of, what's going to go down. So, I mean, I'd be here for that if that is how it ends up going, which I could see. And especially, like you said, the kids specifically age-wise and just time, that would make sense of why they would do it that way.
I think the show has 6 seasons in it.
Really? I think 5. I think we're done after this.
I don't know.
But we'll see.
It's so popular. I feel like there's more there, but I don't know. We'll see. One day we'll kind of break down how we think the whole series is going to end.
But until then, 1 foot at a time. One step at a time. Also, guys, I'm notorious for messing up sayings, so that was a freebie.
That's
I own it. It's fine.
You are.
My friends know it. That's fine.
This podcast is sponsored by Cloud Optimizer.
As a business owner or IT manager, are your cloud investment costs going up and you don't know why? It's time for Cloud Optimizer. As you migrate your business to the cloud, what you're spending and why you're spending it can get a little hazy. But Cloud Optimizer clears up the mystery and puts the cloud to work for you. Cloud Optimizer starts by analyzing usage patterns, right-sizing resources, leveraging discounts you may not be aware of, implementing automation, and much more. And by reducing unnecessary expenses and maximizing performance, Cloud Optimizer guarantees you a savings of 5 times what you spend for their service. As you utilize cloud-based services more and more, you don't have to lose sight or control of your spend. You can stay agile, streamline your costs, and optimize your performance, plus save significant money with Cloud Optimizer.
Make the cloud work for you with Cloud Optimizer. Get a free assessment and find out how much you can save by going to cloudoptimizer.com. Go to cloudoptimizer.com for your free assessment. That's cloudoptimizer.com.
In that split second between like the bullet hitting his head and like the end of his life, he was extremely disappointed and heartbroken. And I think anybody who thinks he did know and was trying to manipulate him, those are cat people.
Yellowstone's 4th season just wrapped a few weeks ago, but news about what's next has us tingling with anticipation. The show's executive producer gave a ballpark date for the start of filming, but our inside man is able to pinpoint when season 5 will start and finish production, and what this means for what viewers will see when we return to the Dutton Ranch. Things are likely to look much, much different. I'm Addison Hager, and with a break between episode 5 and episode 6 of 1883, we're going to take a moment to address a few important facts and theories about the 19th century Western. That's a long list that includes what actor Eric Nelson is saying after his on-screen tragedy, and why he might have been very literal when he said that moving forward, Elsa will carry his memory. Honestly, the show might have leaked its biggest secret, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Tap follow on your preferred podcast platform, and when you finish this episode, take time to revisit conversations with Nelson, Sam Elliott, Tim McGraw, and more in the archives. We'd really appreciate a review and a 5-star rating as well. 5 more and we get a free sandwich! Okay, that's a joke. But in all seriousness, this is Dutton Rules, a Yellowstone and 1883 podcast, and today we'll focus on both shows and an approximate timeline for the 3rd in its franchise, based on action at the 4-6's ranch. This week, we're also going to introduce a new trivia segment of the show that could win you a sweet opportunity. Staff@tasteofcountry.com is the email address, and I promise you'll get a response from either myself or Billy Dukes, who is set to join us right now.
Hello, Addison!
Hello, Billy. I love the enthusiasm, as always, as you're sipping your coffee. You're hyped up on caffeine. And I'm excited for this episode today specifically because it's kind of this one big cornucopia, if you will. We're going to be talking about Yellowstone and 1883, covering fans' comments and theories, kind of some question marks that we have, covering Yellowstone and 1883, as well as theories. This is going to be just a jam-pack of everything.
A real potpourri. And I thought, since there wasn't an episode of 1883 on Sunday night, which is the schedule, I think, is something that we kind of need to talk about because I have some theories or information with regards to that. This would be an opportunity to sort of just hunker down for a second and catch up on what we know about Yellowstone Season 5, what we've seen about 1883. But then I don't know if you're like me, I think about past episodes maybe while I'm falling asleep at night. I'm standing in the shower, I'm going for a walk, and I'm like, oh, I didn't think about it that way. And like, there's like things I want to bring up from like 3 episodes ago that maybe we can't tuck into these weekly recaps.
Yes, I completely agree. I have one specifically, a theory that I'm excited to talk about a little bit later. It has to do with Elsa, and I just can't stop thinking about it.
I wanted to start this episode off a little bit differently. I came up with a new segment, Yellowstone 1883 Trivia.
Okay.
Here's how this is going to work. I'll ask the question at the beginning of the episode. We'll take email responses, staff@tasteofcountry.com, and then next episode, next Monday, or maybe Thursday, but probably next Monday when we recap episode 6, we'll reveal the answer and share a new trivia question. Make sense?
It does make sense, but what's kind of the caveat here? What do they win?
The prize.
Do they win anything?
Okay, yeah, that's
yeah.
fair.
What's the prize? That's what I'm here for, Billy.
I don't have a tangible to give someone, but I am willing to read or say or sing anything anybody wants me to read, sing, or say within limits.
Wow.
Within limits. Like,
it's kind of like, have you seen the app Cameo? This is Cameo, but Yellowstone, the Dutton Rules, a Yellowstone, an 1883 podcast edition.
So no cursing or nudity or foul language, and it can't be like 18 minutes long. Give me something that's reasonable. Maybe a birthday wish, a tribute. If you want me to
this is amazing.
Break up with your girlfriend or boyfriend, I can announce that here during the podcast. But the first person...
Wow, you can do so many different things, Billy.
I'm going right off the top. The first person who gives the correct answer, staff@tasteofcountry.com, they get that reward. You ready?
Wow, I'm here for this.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rip Wheeler is the Dutton family enforcer on Yellowstone, so often he has to beat up or kill anyone standing in the way of the family and its objectives. Who was the very first person we saw Rip kill? And the key words are, we saw. I'll give you a further clue. It happens very, very early on during season 1.
I can be the dun 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 dun.
Think about
dun,
it.
Dun 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 dun.
Yeah, that's it. All right, staff@tasteofcountry.com if you think you know. It was kind of a important but maybe not well-remembered scene.
Okay, well, on that note, moving on, should we talk about the recording of 1883? I know you kind of said, the timing of all that is interesting. I'd love to kind of dive in there as we are 5 episodes into the show. What is happening?
I have 2 theories, and it's possible both are true. This is the second week. We've skipped a week. There was a break between episodes 3 and 4, and now a break between episodes 5 and 6. And we know that 1883 just finished filming on January 15th, so just over a week ago is when they wrapped. Presumably they film chronologically, so episode 10 is, or if there's 10 episodes, is in the can as they're preparing to release episode 6. They very well could be having some production issues with 1883. I think you have to kind of consider that maybe the reason that they're skipping an episode here or skipping a week is because 1883 episode 6 just ain't finished.
Well, man, this tight turnaround, I don't know about you, Billy, but it stresses me out a little bit. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, no doubt about it. Because you got to think there's more considerations than just like the filming. Like there's a lot of times they have to clear certain bits of footage. Maybe they have to clear a song. Like there's some legal matters that have to kind of fall into place. So there's all those sort of boring back end things. I think that could be partially true, but I think a nice little result of that, and maybe this is the other reason, or even the real reason, is after episode 5, which ended very tragically, this show is getting a ton of buzz. Like all of a sudden, the conversation about 1883 is really, really top of mind across the entertainment universe. I think they're getting a lot of new listeners or a lot of new readers coming in from Yellowstone, people who are suddenly interested because they heard about this amazing, agonizing death that happened. They could very well just be milking this thing. And heck, I don't blame them.
I know. Well, it is smart, but man, Billy, you're talking about the Ennis death, and you just put salt in my wound again.
I know.
You know how I handled last episode. Not well. If anyone was wondering and has not listened to the prior episode or previous episode, not well.
Well, I mean, before we kind of get into that, I to sort of tie a bow on this scheduling, I have now, if episode 6 airs on January 30th, we're going to go episode 7, 8, 9, 10 in and around episode February 27th, unless they skip another week. I'm assuming 10 episodes, but that's not confirmed either. It could be 8, as some shows do. I've just started watching the show Peaky Blinders, who do 6-episode seasons. Seems a little bit weak, but so, we could be rolling this thing into March, at least, as we sort of start to recap it.
And then assuming that the potential 4/6's ranch show begins, we're just rolling right through them. No stopping this train.
I think we'll have a little bit of a break there. 1883 was delivered on a really tight turnaround, but they announced the cast like in August, so 3 months before the season premiere. And then they started giving you a lot of lead time. We don't know anything about this 4/6's other than we assume Jefferson White's involved, but they're not going to hang a whole series on little old Jefferson White. I mean, I love the dude. He's fun.
I'd be okay with it.
Great podcast. But after having shows with Kevin Costner and Sam Elliott and Billy Bob Thornton, I mean, all these actors, it's not starring Jefferson White. But, you need a little bit more to sort of whet my appetite to pay $4.99 a month to watch that.
Yeah, I get that. That makes sense. Even though I do love Jefferson White.
My guess is spring, like May-ish for that show. Just a guess.
Well, on that note, do we want to dive first into 1883 before we dive into Yellowstone?
Yes. We do have a little information about Yellowstone Season 5. But let's talk about 1883, because I think people kind of felt how we felt after Ennis's death. It was just a lot of tears, a lot of agony, and surprisingly, a lot of people will go back and rewatch the episode, specifically this episode, again and again and again. And I'm just not here for that kind of torture.
No, I'm a one and done. I saw what I needed to see. I felt what I needed to see, and I don't need to revisit it. Interesting, though.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe you're hoping to feel something different? I don't know. Props to the people who've watched it multiple times. My heart could not take that.
Well, people have started to kind of develop some theories about what's going to happen next for, I guess, specifically Elsa, as we get through the rest of this show.
Well, and I said this on a previous podcast, but I really think this last episode was kind of the last time that we're going to see this lighthearted at any point, Elsa. I think this is truly the turning point of her character where it's going to become pretty dark and just the reality of the hardship and just, the refinement of this character, but more in a downhill type of way. The joy has been stripped from her. She's now, and she's, as she said, she's seeing the world through her mother's eyes now and no longer her own. And so I have a theory kind of on all of this with Elsa and Ennis. I think not only is she pregnant, because number one, if we back all this up to the conversation with Margaret Dutton, where she says, if you end up getting pregnant, I'm not going to take care of the baby. That's on you. And so then you see Elsa trot off to Ennis and pretty much, say, are you man enough to be the father if I have a child? And he goes, hell yes, I am. And then, of course, he dies.
I think I know where you're going. Keep going. This is interesting.
Well, yeah. So, as you even kind of said, this is an episode that so many people have rewatched. And, I think in order to kind of keep Ennis's legacy alive, we're going to have a pregnancy here and a birth of a child. And kind of walking all of this now back, we've seen in the opening, or we've seen throughout Yellowstone this last season, that you'll kind of have flashbacks to 1883, but on the flashbacks of 1883, they're almost future of those flashbacks of, what is to come the flashback scene that I'm specifically talking about that we see in Yellowstone about 1883 is you see a glimpse of James and Margaret Dutton in their future.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one scene, so it specifically takes place in 1893. 10 years later, you see James Dutton Sr., who at the time that we're watching right now is 5 years old, and now you see him as a teenager. But now there's a second little kiddo.
Yes.
Who's named Spencer.
Right.
Where did this kid come from? Well, here is my theory, Billy. So far, we haven't met Spencer, which obviously, if James Dutton Sr. is a teenager at this flashback, obviously we're not going to see him in current episodes of 1883 Spencer, because too young, that doesn't add up.
He wouldn't be alive yet.
But in all these flashbacks that we're seeing, Elsa's nowhere to be seen. However, if we recall, in the opening scene of 1883, we get a future of Elsa being impaled with an arrow by the Native Americans. And so my theory is that this Spencer kiddo is Elsa and Ennis's child, and Elsa was killed.
She was killed by the natives.
Mm-hmm. And so now James and Margaret Dutton are raising this child, Spencer. Water break.
Well, I think one thing that always bothered me about that little boy in the Yellowstone flashbacks is he did look to be about 10 years old. And I was just doing the math on the age that Margaret and James Dutton would be. And, you know, I feel like they're probably currently in their 40s, maybe. Near 40. Probably on the north side of 40, maybe even pushing 50. That's awfully late for a woman in the late 19th century to be having a baby. They did not look like they were still eagerly looking to add family members. So where that kid came from, I could never really figure out. So that's why I do think there's a lot of weight to that theory. Elsa has this baby, and then she gets killed either by the natives or in some other fashion. And ironically, Margaret has to take care of this child and raise him just like she said she wouldn't do.
And that's, I mean, I think regardless of if Spencer is James and Margaret's child or if it's Elsa and Ennis's child, I think regardless, Elsa is pregnant, because I don't think that they would have had that such pivotal conversation between mother and daughter, and then Ennis dies, which would completely, you know, detract from potentially Margaret's original statement that she made of, I'm not going to help you raise him. Well, now there's no father involved because he was literally killed. So now she'll step in and help out.
Save big money on plant protection supplies, now at Menards. Defend your garden with Triazicide Insect Killer. Its fast-acting formula protects lawns, vegetables, and many other plants. It kills more than 260 insects by contact, above and below ground. Choose from ready to spray, concentrate, or granular. Save big money on Triazicide Insect Killer at Menards. And check out our weekly flyer on Menards.com for all the great deals happening now.
Save big money at Menards.